production proper got underway at Rover's Solihull factory in the summer of 1948, and the Land Rover was an immediate success, both at home and abroad. This one is one of those very early production vehicles, number 53 in fact, and it's still going strong today. The fact that much of the paint has worn off doesn't really matter.
At the moment I'm in second gear low ratio. I'm just about to change into high ratio on the move. Not on the move. We're now in high ratio first gear.
It was the alloy panels and the immensely strong box section chassis you can see here which made the Land Rover so durable. Even today, more than 45 years later, the basic features of box section chassis and alloy panels are still part of the Land Rover's specification. It wasn't long before Rover decided to expand the Land Rover range, and by the autumn of 1948 they had arranged for a coach builder to manufacture a wooden-framed 7-seat station wagon body. The Land Rover station wagon was an attractive-looking vehicle, but it didn't sell well because it was too expensive. The body cost a lot to build, and as a passenger-carrying vehicle, it was subject to purchase tax in the UK, just like a car. This made it nearly twice as expensive as the basic Land Rover utility on the home market, and it was withdrawn after just 651 had been made in 3 years. They're very rare today. The basic Land Rover was selling like hot cakes all over the world, but that didn't stop the customers from saying what they thought about it. Mostly what they said was very complimentary, but there were two main areas where they wanted improvements. The first was in the road performance, and Rover responded to that by fitting a more powerful 2-litre engine in place of the original 1.6-litre type during 1951. The second area for improvement was the payload. The Land Rover's customers wanted more space and the ability to carry heavier loads. So Rover responded to that by introducing not one, but 2 new models in 1953. The first of these directly replaced the original 80-inch wheelbase Land Rover and had a bigger load bed made possible by an extra 6 inches in the wheelbase and an increased rear overhang. The second new Land Rover, introduced alongside the 86-inch model, was very much larger. Originally conceived as a pickup, it sat on a 107-inch wheelbase.
This is a 1956 107-inch Land Rover. It's one of the most original I've ran. I've been driving Land Rovers for about 4 years now. I started when I was 12. Yeah. And I learned to drive in an 80-inch 1949 one. It's now famous because it's been around the world 2 or 3 times. About the best thing on the road, these are.
In 1954, a station wagon Land Rover appeared again, this time using a much simpler and cheaper body which was built up largely out of parts used in other versions of the Land Rover, such as the hardtop. This time it was a success, and it was followed a couple of years later by a 10-seater station wagon on the long wheelbase chassis.
The Land Rover Series 1 was rather a special vehicle. This vehicle, SYB 617, it was in fact the oldest surviving 1954 86-inch station wagon. I became more and more interested in the vehicle. And I later found that this vehicle was in fact the very same vehicle that was displayed at the 1954 Old School Motor Show.
But the one thing the Land Rover didn't yet have was a diesel engine option, and Rover were continually being asked for one by customers who ran Land Rovers within fleets of diesel lorries. So they drew up a new overhead valve 2-litre diesel engine in the mid-1950s and offered it on production models from 1957. But before that, there had been another change in the wheelbase. The diesel engine was physically larger than the petrol engine, and Rover had to stretch the engine bay by 2 inches to fit it in. Those 2 inches went in behind the front axle, with the result that the 86-inch Land Rover became an 88-inch, and the 107-inch became a 109-inch. The wheelbase change was made in 1956, about 6 months before the diesel engine was announced, so that Rover could spread the cost of tooling up for new chassis and new engines. This is a very early 88-inch model, and it's hard to tell from an 86-inch unless you know what to look for. The 2 giveaways are the position of the front wing retaining bolt, it's further back on the 88, and the grille panel, which has just 1 aperture instead of 3.
This is a 3/4 scale Series 1 Land Rover built by my brother and I. It took 5 years from the drawing board to actually build it. This prototype actually took less than 12 months to build, but the jigs and all the master jigs that went with it took that length of time. I'll just take it for a spin. The actual body is all aluminium apart from the outer wings. Rear axle of it is actually from a Bedford Rascal. We cut the axle and reduced it down to size so that the diff is actually offset like the full size one. It's actually powered by a 13 horsepower Kubota engine, but the biggest part was really getting all the donor parts and making it look as authentic as possible.
By 1958, the Land Rover had been in production for 10 years, and it still looked very much the same as when it was first introduced. But in the mid-1950s, Rover's newly established styling department was asked to take a look at it. In conjunction with the engineers, they came up with a package of very worthwhile improvements.